Do you ever get into the situation where you think you're going to have a beautiful painting? Your reference is gorgeous. How could your painting be anything but gorgeous? But you get into the painting process and all of a sudden your painting looks really ugly. And you've kind of been working on it a while, and it actually went through a pretty phase where you put on those first few layers. It looked so good, and then you kept working on it, and then it just started looking worse and worse and worse. Well, in today's video, I'm going to give you several tools that you can use to pull your painting out of what we artists often call the ugly stage. And there's actually some really good general rules about painting and about putting a painting together and rules of composition that you can rely on when you're having a hard time with your painting. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Rachel Parker Varner, and I like to teach not just the how, but the why of watercolor, so you move along your painting journey a lot faster. And I have a couple free ways that you can follow me more closely. You can follow me on Facebook by joining my Facebook group, and there you can post your paintings and get feedback on them, or just post them to share. And we're a great community. We learn a lot from each other. I learn a lot from my community. And another place that you can follow me more closely for free is on my Patreon. So you can kind of get a feel for how I run my Patreon, what I'm doing on my Patreon, and just seeing what I'm up to, and then deciding from there if you want to join a paid tier. But if you are interested in my paid Patreon, I will talk more about my paid Patreon offerings at the end of this video. But for now, let's go ahead and jump into some of the things that I did to pull this painting out of the ugly stage. Here we go. So for those of you who are not new to my channel, you know I love to use a scrubber. And to use a scrubber, you need to use non-staining paint on good paper. I like Arch Cold Press. You get your paint completely dry. So my eye is completely dry here, and my scrubber is wet. And start easy at first. Just scrub lightly. And you can scrub at a few of the edges around your eye, or if it's a tree or a flower or a vase, whatever it is. Doesn't have to be an eye. You can soften edges no matter what you're painting. And so I created a disappearing edge on the bottom of the eye. And even Charles Reed says you should have half hard edges and half soft edges, and that applies to painting eyes, flowers, noses, anything. So here I scrubbed a little bit of the eye, and now I'm refining the shape a little bit with a smaller brush. And that's another trick that you can use to make your eyes a lot more beautiful, is to add details like the eye glint. But here I'm just almost creating some shadows too around the eye as I scrub it. And now it looks a lot dreamier. But we're going to do more to this eye, and we're actually going to go into, here we go into a real ugly stage. I decided to put in some medium values because I thought that would make the lighting more dramatic. And the way that I did that is that I got a second reference. This one's by Dan Newcomb on Flickr. His fox photograph had much better lighting than the other one that I was using by Cecilia Sonsteby. The light was a lot more dramatic. So I used this to add some shadows to my fox so he doesn't look so flat. But my painting started looking really ugly right about here. And part of it is my camera video was on the wrong setting. But actually also as I painted this, it looked so ugly. The values in the shadows looked so strong and dark. But did I panic? No, I didn't. So here we are entering an extremely ugly stage. Ooh, it's bad. How can I possibly save this? Well, one thing, you just let it dry. And some of those dark colors will dry and they'll lighten up and look a lot more delicate. But now my problem is I have a lot of light fox on dark background. I'm bringing in the big boys. I'm not using a scrubber. I'm going to use a magic eraser, and I'm going to make some light on light edges, because right now it's all mostly light fox on dark background. There's a few light on light edges. There's a few dark on dark edges, But I'm going to make some more disappearing edges to hopefully breathe some dreaminess into this painting and take out some of the harsh ugliness. So I had some little hard edges of how my paint had dry. My paint dried in kind of awkward areas. So while I was at it, I softened those up, but I'm making a lost edge along his back. And also I'm going to make more of a lost edge here along his chest. How do I choose where to put lost edges? Lost edges are usually either in shadows or in less important areas. A lot of times where you have a straight, long edge, you can make a lost edge there. So his back, the edge along his top line on his back was not an important area. And so I made that a disappearing edge with my magic eraser. And also along his chest is a less important area because his face is the most important area. So I have my highest contrast there and my lightest lights and my darkest darks. And you're going to see in a minute how I use contrast to make that even more of a bold contrast around his face. So I used a scrubber to create some lost and found edges. So again, lost edges are usually in the shadows. I will have a lost edge around underneath his tail, along his chest, along his back, and also in areas where there's bold contrast near the edge of your painting where you do not want the viewer's eye to remain. That's another place to have softer transitions, softer edges, lost edges. So I'm going to make another lost edge here where there's a lot of contrast with his tail. I don't want that. I don't want my viewer to slip off his tail and have their eye slip out of the painting. So that's why I made that a softer edge, because I wanted it to be quieter here. So bold contrasts make for distracting areas in your painting if you don't want them to be the star of the show. So I softened that edge there by his tail for that reason. If some of your shadows do get a little heavy, you can lighten them with the scrubber. All right, another thing that you can do is create more bold contrast around the most interesting area in your painting. And for me, that's his face. So I got everything wet behind the fox's face, and now I'm dropping in cream consistency paint onto wet paper. And because I pre-wet my paper, that paint will just float onto my paper and kind of mix itself wherever I got it wet. And I am having to use a brush with just clean water in it to soften the edges. But that contrast around his face is really going to tell the viewer's eye, really look at the face. This is the area of interest, and it helps pull the painting together. All right, another thing that you can do is if you have a lot of cools like this, or if you have a color that you really want to vibrate, this fox is mostly blue. So to vibrate with the blues, I'm going to use a color that's the complement of blue. And depending on what style you want, I wanted this to be kind of eye-popping, contemporary looking. So I used more pure colors, but you can also use like a grayed down orange. It doesn't have to be this bright eye-popping orange to vibrate with the blues. But I personally use transparent pyrrole orange to vibrate with the blues in my painting. I do think that it might have been even prettier to gray down my orange a little bit by adding a little bit of blue to it, just a little. But I warmed up my painting because there were so many cools. That's why I decided to put some warms in it to balance out the cools. And this is another really great way to pull your painting together. One thing you can do is to spatter in just a few places to break up the large shapes. In this case, it was easy to create white spatter with white paint or ink. You can use white ink or gouache. And I made a starry look behind the fox. And now I'm going to add a moon just to add a little bit of story to this painting. Here's an Arctic fox out in his environment, out in a cold night sky, under a cold night sky. So I'm using a pouncer by the late great Art Sherpa. There are other pouncers out there, and I just put white watercolor paint on my pouncer and mushed my moon on. Here's another tip that you can use to pull your painting together and bring it out of the ugly stage. And that's just putting in the last little final details, like the stars, like the whiskers. I'm putting the whiskers on, in this case, with a white gel pen, white Signo Broad gel pen. And that really helped pull this painting together as well. So I'm just putting a little bit of white gel pen here and there. You don't want to overdo it. So if you do all these things, you've got high contrast, you've balanced out your values, you've added in details, and your painting still doesn't look good to you, just give it a rest. Just put it away for a day or two or a couple weeks even. Or you can also post it on a Facebook group. That's why it's great to join a Facebook group like my group, where you can post it and say, I have come up against a bit of a brick wall with this painting, help. And a lot of times people will give you really good suggestions on how to pull your painting together. And that can be a great way also to find a way through the forest of painting a more complex painting, especially, is to just ask for advice and post it on a Facebook group and get some suggestions, and you will be surprised how people will give you the best ideas. I love to do that. All right. Thank you so much for joining me. And here is another fox, by the way, that I started, and I'm just playing with it, being experimental. And I actually painted this after my blue fox, but I just want to show you guys, it's not just you that needs to paint things more than once or keep trying. When I paint a new thing for me, like I don't paint cardinals, I paint a lot of cats and dogs. So when I was painting my cardinal project, I painted my cardinal several times. So you might have to paint something more than once. And for example, with this Arctic fox here, I was painting this and it got to be so ugly that I actually took it and washed it completely off in the tub and made an even bigger mess of it. And I will probably still mess with it even more, and who knows if I'll be able to bring it out of the ugly stage. But the point is that it happens to everybody, and don't let that make you feel like you can't paint, because it's a very common part of the creative process to struggle with your work and really, it's very painful sometimes. You feel like you have no talent, but that is very common to experience that as part of your creative process. And if you're not struggling, maybe you're not pushing your art hard enough. Oh, here's here's my fox after I washed it off in the tub, and it looks real bad. So it remains to be seen at the time of this recording whether I'll be able to pull it out of the depths of despair. But hey, it's all part of the process. So don't feel alone. You're not the only one that struggles. You're not the only one that feels like imposter syndrome. Who am I to think that I can do this? It's part of the process. Keep going, especially if you're really passionate about your art. You got to be a little stubborn to be an artist. You got to be determined. I feel like that's what I hear from most artists, even the ones that I admire. I think they're so good. They say they struggle too. It's just a part of the creative process. So anyway, I hope you'll come join me on my artistic journey and learn with me. I love to share my process on my Patreon. And here's a little bit more about how my Patreon works, and I hope you'll come join me. For those of you who are interested in learning from me more in depth, now I want to tell you a little bit about my paid online school, if you're interested. That's why I put it at the end. I don't want to waste anyone's time. So if you are interested in painting loose impressionistic animals, like the basset hound up here is one, my festive sheep, I love this tutorial. This is a beginner level. I did a lot of wet on dry, which is a lot easier, but then I did a special trick to loosen it up. Love this tutorial. That's in my $13 tier. So if you want to paint dreamy animals, I have a lot of cats. If you like cats, I'm probably the teacher for you because I paint a lot of cats. The way my Patreon works is you can join for free and then you'll kind of stay in touch with me, and that might help you decide too if you want to join for a paid tier. So join for free, just start getting a taste of how my Patreon works. And then if you like it, you can move up into a higher tier. I would recommend the more beginner you are, the higher tier you're going to want, other than not my $30 tier. Although that might be good too, because I just changed my $30 tier to be a mentoring tier where for $30 a month, you get a Zoom call with me along with all my other $30 members. So it's all my $30 members. There's not a lot, there's a handful of them. So you'd still get a lot of one-on-one time, and not everyone's going to be able to join, I'm guessing, for that Zoom call. So it'll be a Zoom video call where I can demonstrate techniques, or you can show me your work and ask me questions. We'll figure it out together as a group where we want to go with that Zoom call, but that'll be a half-hour Zoom call once a week. I'm going to start that. I'm really excited. It's a new idea that one of my new members gave me that idea. So thank you, Elizabeth. So that's my $30 tier. That's the most hand-holding. Then my next one down that I would recommend is my $13 tier. And those are my highly edited tutorials. Those are almost like courses. They're such a good deal because in each tutorial in that tier, they are highly detailed. So I talk a lot in depth in most of them about my supplies, what paper I use, what paint I use, why I use it, and really go in depth to explain everything that I can think of to set you up for success. And then as I paint, I have commentary. And then even in some tutorials, I slow down the footage so I can really explain things really well. The better way to use my Patreon to the full effect is, one, message me and ask for recommendations of what a good tutorial would be for you. And then two, access my library, use my library. You can, even if you're a free member, you can go look at my library to see if you would be interested in any of my tutorials. You can go to www.patreon.com/RachelStudio/collections. And then in there are all different kinds of tutorials categorized by what they are about, whether they're a certain tier or if they're a subject. Like I have a cat collection, dogs, landscapes, flowers, beginner, advanced, quickies, etc. I also have a visual index at rachelstudio.com/Patreon index. That is my website, not my Patreon. So that's not where my tutorials are housed. It's just where my index, my visual index is housed. But that's my Patreon. I do hope you'll come and paint with me. Of course, I would love that. So also, if you join for a year, just know you get 2 months free. You pay for 10 months and you get 2 months free. So it's a great deal. And then you lock in that tier level price for sure if you join for a year. So that's really a good deal too. If you think you're going to paint with me for a while, go ahead and join for a year. And then you save yourself some money. But at least join for free and join my Facebook group for free, where you can post your paintings. And I try to comment on every single painting that people post. And if you ask for recommendations, I will give you recommendations. But like I said, do join my Facebook group, join my Patreon for free. My community tab is another place you can keep up with my shenanigans. And I think that's everything. I hope you'll subscribe to learn not just the how, but the why of watercolor, so you move along your painting journey a lot faster and go watercolor your world. Bye, everybody.